Hello and welcome to Work to Game. My name is Brian and this is our Dark Knight Tanking and Controller Guide. In this guide we're going to be breaking down my layout, my macros, how I do targeting, my whole controller setup, and everything. If you have any questions or I miss anything, please sound off in the comments below and we can have that conversation. Now, after watching this guide, you should have a really good understanding of how to use the Dark Knight on a controller. There's a lot here that you can do, and I hope to really give you some ideas. Now, at the end of the day, it's about finding your right comfort level and your muscle memory skill. That's really what this is going to focus in on. But ideally, you're going to be leaving this hopefully with some good ideas and some things to try on your own. However, always feel free to hit us up on Discord or in the comments below if you have any additional questions. The Dark Knight is a ton of fun to play, and we couldn't do this without the help of our YouTube members and our Patreons. Thank you all for your support in helping to help this channel make more content. So we want to say thank you. Now, if you guys are interested, you can always check out the join button below. If you want to be a part of that squad, we'll be sure to thank you guys all appropriately at the end of this video. And one last thing before we dive into everything, please be sure to check out our Casually Hardcore Podcast Highlights channel. The link will be in the description below. We really hope that you go and subscribe to that channel. We have been having a ton of fun and having a ton of amazing guests, and that is a really good way that you can kind of just jump in and dive into various different pieces rather than have to catch up on a whole hour-long podcast. So be sure to hit that subscribe button over there as well, and we hope and look forward to seeing you over there. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. I'm so excited to show you guys my layout. I've been working on this for a while, been testing it out and having a ton of fun with Dark Knight and Shadowbringers. So here's the layout. You can see it. We're going to go skill by skill, but I want to dive into character configuration, and then I want to go into hotbar settings really quick because I want to show you how you get this specific layout right away. Under custom, you need to enable W cross hotbar with simultaneous LT and RT double tap. That's also enabled for the directional buttons. I've had to do this since they made the 5.05 updates to Scholar, so I'm just keeping it across all jobs, and it's actually giving me a lot of freedom, and you can kind of see that here. This needs to be turned on. Enable expanded controls with left tap, RT, and then LT, and LT, and then RT. That needs to be turned on as well. You can see that I've got it set for 3 left, 3 right, 2 left, and 7 right. We'll cover that more in detail after we go over the layout, but I said you need to have this kind of layout if you're following along at home. So I just want to turn that on under character configuration, under system settings, and then under HUD layout, you want to go in here and you want to set up hotbar 3 right here, left cross hotbar, right cross hotbar, my main cross hotbar listed here, and my parameter bar. Now we're going to go over this in more detail just in a little bit, but I wanted to show you this really quick so you can kind of, again, follow along at home. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over our whole layout. We have Flood of Shadow and Edge of Shadow. This is from Flood of Darkness and Edge of Darkness. These upgrade, and so I just kind of place them here to constantly keep them on my mind so I can try to keep them up as much as possible. Then I have Dark Missionary, Living Shadow, Plunge, Living Dead, and Shirk. And we use a macro for Shirk, so I'll show you that macro here in a little bit as well, but just keep that in mind. Now I have Interject, Living Dead, and Arm's Length here on my double cross hotbar left, which is a part of my hotbar 3, and I'll show you that in more detail here in a second. On my left hand side, I've got my AoE Wheel of Pain, as I like to say. So Unleash, Stalwart Soul, Quitus, and Abyssal Drain. And so this is kind of everything that's going to be AoE centric that I'm going to use. And again, it's important from a controller player perspective that for anything that I need to be doing and moving at the same time, things that don't have a cast bar, I want to put that on my A, X, Y, B, or X square, triangle, circle buttons respectively, because they're very easily accessible when you're moving around with the left stick. So keep that in mind just as a general rule overall. Then over here on the D-pad, I've got Delirium, Salted Earth, Living Shadow, and Blackest Night. Those end up having a little bit of an uptime. Salted Earth, Living Shadow, and Delirium all kind of have longer casting times. So those are kind of over there because I'm not using them as frequently. Now over here on the right hand side, same rules apply for movement versus anything else. Some exceptions, obviously Carve and Spit, but that is a 60-second cooldown ability, so it's not always up in that regards. But I've got Hard Slash, Siphon Strike, and Soul Eater along with Blood Splitter. Now Blood Splitter is connected obviously with Delirium, or obviously your darkness gauge, your blood gauge being able to be used. Here I've got Blood Weapon, Edge of Shadow, Flood of Shadow, and Carve and Spit. And you can see that Blood Weapon, Edge of Carven Split, and Abyssal Drain, they're all in those 60-second recast times. This kind of applies into your rotation, so keep that in mind because these are skills that you end up weaving in and out as needed, at least on every minute. Try to keep the uptime on these as much as possible. On my double hot crossbar right, I've got Dark Mind, Dark Missionary, Rampart, Shadow Wall, and Unmend. You can see here, if you get catching a theme, these are my cooldowns. These are how I mitigate damage coming in. I also have that ability here on my expanded cross hotbar with left trigger and right trigger. Now we'll go ahead and just show you that off. Ignore all these abilities over here because I never access them. On the A button, I've got Plunge. This makes it easy as I'm moving in to jump in and dive in. Same thing for Unmend. I've separated those from the macro because it is just nice to have, and if you have a lower ping, I wouldn't necessarily recommend, or a high ping, using the macro itself. I've ended up splitting it out because I wanted that a little bit more control, and I had actually space on my hotbars to do so with the Dark Knight. Then here I have Reprisal, and then here I have Low Blow. You'll notice that Reprisal and Low Blow and Plunge and Unmend match to what I've actually done and set up on the Paladin. Now the one change that I've made from Paladin is before I had Provoke over here, but I've kind of moved that over here. Provoke is not an AoE ability. It does not have, it's only single target, and it's not hard to get hate back using my AoE rotation, so I've ended up prioritizing my Gap Closer on A and my my distance attack on the X button respectively. And then here I have Grit, which is going to turn me into tank stance or not tank stance. And like you said, or I already showed you with the Hotbar 3, left and right, this is actually where you set the abilities. You cannot do so up here. It's not going to let you do that. You have to actually do it here on the third hotbar, or whatever hotbar you end up choosing. I recommend 3. It's easier to manage. Lastly, like we talked about, our left trigger, right trigger, but I have right trigger, left trigger. This is where all of my cooldowns are, or excuse me, this is where all my abilities that are saved and shared across all the jobs live. You can see a couple macros here. I'll show you guys those in a second. A couple mounts that I need. My limit break, which I don't need as a tank as much. Sprint, and my random mount button. That all exists there, and that's actually a part of the 7 set. You can see that listed right here as well. If you guys don't know how I'm switching between the hotbar sets, you can easily just hold down the right bumper and press any of the buttons on the D-pad to easily switch between the various hotbars themselves. Again, we'll go over my settings here in just a minute. Now, I do want to say, talk about a macro that I have, which is the Provoke macro. You can see here with with Salted Earth, here is a macro, and I'll show that to you as well. But if you go into your system and then you go into your user macros, you're going to see a ton of macros that you can have access to. So here's a couple that I use. 1, 2, and 6 are a lot of fun. This is just essentially marking a target and then obviously focusing that target and notifying people of that. I have 6 here with a countdown macro. This is just a focus target. It's a little bit of role play with finally a challenge. And then there's a countdown. So as a tank, I want to communicate things to my party, and if you're on PlayStation 4 or if you're on PC and you just don't want to lean over and type in, it's kind of nice to have these little macros to kind of help manage and just inform the party of certain things. The marking 1 and 2 targets is very handy if you end up having a DPS that kind of spread out, or if you're having trouble holding the hate. Now, not necessarily as important in Shadowbringers, but just in case you want to mark a kill order, you can do so this way as well. Now, I talked about Provoke. This actually came from the community. I was digging through the comments to find out who actually recommended I join these, so I do apologize, but this is an incredible macro. What this means is if I'm attacking or I'm targeting an enemy, I'm going to use Provoke. If I am not targeting an enemy, since I cannot provoke a party member, I'm going to use Shirk. So Provoke and Shirk, it ends up becoming one ability. Do I want to essentially push hate onto the tank? In this case, I want to Shirk. Do I want to provoke the monster? Then I want to provoke in that regards. So it gives me that ability to do both, and that's why I have Shirk here on my Hotbar 3, because then it's going to communicate that Shirk is on cooldown, because I do not have direct access to the Shirk button, but I do have access to Provoke, and aka in this macro. Then right here we have Salted Earth. Salted Earth's got the macro icon Salted Earth and just Salted Earth with the target on it. This means that it's going to put Salted Earth on whomever I'm targeting, which makes it real easy as a controller player. I do not have to line it up and set it. So I highly recommend using Salted Earth in this fashion. That's pretty much it. That's the macros that I use for Dark Knight. Simple, easy, straightforward. Okay, so now let's talk about how you target and manage hate respectively. As a tank, it's pretty much advised that you want to do your AoE rotation, especially with different adds. There's no real penalty to it anymore. So you can see here, I'm just building up, and then right here on the left-hand side, I've got my various enemy list right here, and you can see the various targets, and the fact that I'm all in red is a very, very good thing. Okay. So let's say I want to switch targets from striking dummy A to B to C. There's a couple ways I can do this. While I'm attacking and holding down the trigger, you can use both the bumper buttons, the left bumper L1, R bumper R1, to easily target different players. Now, if I'm holding down right trigger, it's a little bit more comfortable for me just to tap the left bumper, and all of a sudden I have now switched targets, and I can do this easily and go through the list. You can see here this works from a left to right fashion. Now, I can also do the same for right bumper. It's less comfortable for me to do so in that way. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, from here, I can also do something else. Holding down the left bumper, I can actually hit up and down on the D-pad. So if I want to go from here and hit C, I can do so. So if you're looking at your enemy list and you see that everything's red but one, you can actually easily hold down left bumper, go to the one that you are not red on, and start focusing your attack there in case something has peeled off and it's going after the healer or one of your DPS jobs in that regard. So just that's one way to going about doing it. But more advanced targeting is actually located under System, Character Configuration, Control Settings, and then Filters. Filters are going to be your bread and butter for keeping a clean and easy to target enemy out there in the world. So you can see here I have two filters already kind of set up in place. Weapon is sheathed, weapon is drawn. So when it's sheathed, meaning I'm not currently have my weapon out, here's everything by using the D-pad on the controller that I'm targeting, as long as I'm not holding down left trigger and right trigger. So with that, you can literally, in this case, non-party PCs, alliance members, all pets, etc. I turned off party members because you can actually cycle through your entire party list by using the up and down buttons on the D-pad. Now, when my weapon is drawn, you can actually set that by pressing down on the left stick as a click, as a button. You can see here now I'm in enemies. So I'm only going to be targeting enemies with left and right on the D-pad. Very handy thing to have. Again, no party members, nothing else. When my weapon is out, I do not care about anything else in this world except for these targeting dummies over here, which essentially would be registered as enemies. With my weapon put away, boom, 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 I can now start targeting anything and everything under the sun. You can see how this can kind of get intimidating when you're out in the open world and there's a lot of players and a lot of things going on. I just want to hit the enemy. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's attack. That's what it's all about right there. So hopefully that helps with targeting. Hopefully that helps with the macros and the layout. But now let's go into my setup. Let's talk about all my settings and hopefully give you guys some really good ideas or some things to try when you're on your Dark Knight. You're going to find all these settings that I've covered here under System Configuration. So we went over filters. You can see that what I have currently set up. You can also expand on this with filter customization, in which that you can hold down the left bumper and just like it doing up and down and various things, think of this as some kind of shift or alt kind of click, where in which that you can now enable by pressing YBA and X or square, circle, triangle, etc. You can actually have additional filters for things that you want. Let's say you're in town. Let's say you're doing an alliance raid. Maybe you want to turn that on. You can easily control all that with custom filter options here. Under my target, I have automatically lock on target turned off with auto attack. You can turn this on if you desire. You can always auto lock on target when you're fighting something by just clicking down on the right stick to make that happen as well. So you can turn that on and off manually, or if you're struggling keeping your focus on the target, be sure to turn this on. This will help out a lot. It's Legend of Zelda style. It will help out a ton. You also have a couple different things: targeting closest enemies, ignoring the depth, or focusing in on a cone, meaning obviously closest and going out further and further. So you can kind of play around with that as well. A lot of this goes under the hotbar settings here. You can see obviously I had hotbar 3. I've got hotbar 3 set up for a 12:1. You can change how it's filtered and displayed here, especially with pet and more. So look over these settings, kind of toy around with them, especially if you're watching this and you're not a Dark Knight and you're like, well, how do I do this? You stumbled onto this guide. Happenstance, there you go. I have display hotbar numbers turned off because I like to have my UI a little clean. I have hide unassigned slots turned off as well. You can see if I uncheck that, they come back into view, and you can see various things that if I want to put something up here, I can do so. I have display recast times, enable hotbar cycling option, include pet hotbar when cycling, and enable drag and drop for repositioning. You can manage and control all this as needed. Under my sharing, hotbar 1 through 7 is not shared. Cross hotbar 1 through 6 is not shared. It means it's job specific. That even applies to the class. A class is not a job, so it kind of, regardless, they have their own hotbar specific. Then you can see what I do have shared, 8 through 10 on my hotbars and 7 and 8 on my cross hotbar. That means anything that's put on there, no matter what job I'm playing, it's going to be the same setup each and every time. Under my cross hotbar, I have enable cross hotbar, always display the cross hotbar, display cross hotbar help is turned off, use the pet hotbar, use the mount hotbar, enable duty action input, and display control guide if you want any of those. You got to be in hold mode to have access to all of these features, but if you do want to play around with toggle to mix, check them out. They might help you out, especially when getting started and you don't have a lot of things going on, but hold is really where you're going to want to end up ultimately. Cross hotbar display types, D-pad plus buttons. You can kind of change this as well and get kind of seeing how that kind of looks and see if that works better for you. And then for the W cross hotbar, I have always display it. Return to the cross hotbar after double cross hotbar input. So if you see I use Dark Missionary, boom, I'm back and focused in on my my main cross hotbar. These are cooldowns. These are one-off abilities. I'm not going to go live on that cross hotbar. If I go to it, I want to use whatever I'm going over there for and return me back to it. And then I have position cross hotbar separately from the double cross hotbar. If you're having a problem, because if you're struggling to get into the cross hotbar with a double click, some people have said like, hey, it's just not firing. I don't think I'm fast enough. You can adjust the input timer that you need for that. So you can increase it or decrease it as needed, depending on how your hands and how your comfort level with the controller is. Finally, we kind of covered this already. Expand controls with LTRT. Like I said, 2 left, which again is not shared. 7 right is shared. And then for my expanded cross hotbar, that is 3 left and 3 right, which is specific. You can also go in here and do various custom filters. So you can say when my weapon is sheathed, I only want to cycle hotbar 1, 7, and 8. So if I just press it and tap the right bumper, well, not in here, obviously, if I just click off, it's only going to cycle between 7 and 8, and I can customize that here. When my weapon is drawn, I don't want it to leave 1, 2, or 3 if I accidentally press the right bumper or R1 in this case. You can also then do the same thing for PvP settings, but there really isn't much to cover here regarding PvP at this time. We'll update this probably with a PvP focus in the future because they're coming out with new updates in patch 5.1 in October or November of 2019. Anyway, those are those settings. And then lastly, I'm not going to change, discard, pull. Going into the HUD layout, we kind of touched on this briefly, but here's kind of my logic in it. You can see I've got a lot of information here. Status enfeeblements, enhancements, my 3, we already kind of covered this. I do have my limit gauge down here. I ended up moving it because it was just a little bit more comfortable and easier to see as I've been leveling up my DPS. But parameter bar, dark side gauge, blood gauge, both in simplified mode. Progress bar, I'll go ahead and move you up a little bit just so you guys can see it a little bit better. You also have lots of settings that you can kind of apply to this. So just before like enhancements, you click on the settings icon, you can see that I've got my enhancements split out into 3 groups. So enhancements, enfeeblements, and then I've got my other statuses like food, additional XP, and more. Got my party list over here, my target hotbar, my experience bar, not as important at level 80, but it's still there as well. Notices, inventory grid, and really what's important also is the enemy list. That way you can easily see it. The reason I usually kind of have a narrow focus, I can see how Dragoon is a, a floor tank because you kind of get in that focus of your rotation and really trying to work on that. And that's a part of the challenge with the Dark Knight. I end up living a lot in this as well. And then obviously have my party list for my Blackest Night if I need to apply it to anybody else besides myself. With that, that is my controller and tanking guide. Hopefully this has been a very good introduction to the Dark Knight. Hopefully this sets you up for success. If you're worried like, hey, I'm not level 80, it doesn't matter. You can actually assign all these skills from the get-go as soon as you unlock Dark Knight. So just kind of play around with it. See what works best for you. See what makes you feel at home, what's comfortable for you. You do not need to follow this layout specifically. It's about getting that comfort and that confidence in how you play the role and how you play the job. I would absolutely recommend you check out Dark Knight. It's a ton of fun to play. One of my favorite jobs so far this expansion. We'll put together a versus video regarding the tanks here soon enough, but just keep that in mind. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. This has been Brian for Work to Game. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.